What's your belief about whether people should grind out in their 20s or not?
I think it's a really important thing to do. But everybody's on their own path. I initially wanted to be an actor. I was a professional actor in New York City for about 11 years. And I spent most of my 20s pursuing that. And I would travel around the world and do shows and party and live the life of a bohemian. And looking back, I couldn't have chosen to live my life differently because that's who I was. I'm sure if well-meaning Orion got in a time machine and said, hey, look, man, your lifetime earning is going down and your real passion is psychology and helping people and self-discipline. And he'd be like, go fuck yourself, buddy. So like I had to live the life that I lived because that's who I was, right? And that put me on one level behind some of my peers who in their late 20s were already, they've gone through medical school, they've gone through law school, they have their secure lifestyles, they were partnering up, they were having children, they were buying houses, and I was still living in subsidized housing in Brooklyn, from month to month. And that's a harder look the older that you get, right? So then I entered into a period of grinding where I burned all my boats. There was no plan B. And I worked 120-hour weeks for 5 straight years without taking a day off. It was awful. But it positioned me to create the life that I live today. I remember when I was back in that housing, I was visualizing my life, like down to the decoration of the office that I wanted to have. And I realized 8 years later, I had arrived there. Like it took me 8 years to actually manifest the dream that I had when I was in my late 20s. And I think that's about right. I think it can take 7 to 10 years to make a dream a reality. And I call that like a chapter of life. And people have several chapters to their lives, but they don't have an infinite number of chapters. What is it like? Average age is 70, maybe 10 years so maybe 50 good years divided by 7. So you get maybe 7 or 8 good chapters in your life. You got to, and so like, what's the theme of this chapter? What do you want to have accomplished at the end of it? Where do you want to position yourself for what happens next? I think it takes so much more work than most people think in order to achieve a goal, to make a dream come true. But that's really what life is about. Life is like the dream making factory, man. This is where it happens. This is where you get to make it real. There's nothing more thrilling and exciting about this. I don't know what your spiritual belief is, but that could be why there's all of these spirits floating around, just can't wait to get down here on Earth to make something happen. Because this might be the only show in town.
It's exciting to think about uncertainty of the future, and I understand it, and I see it in myself. Like, it's anxiety inducing. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't have certainty about the fact that things are going to work out, or that my dreams are going to occur correctly, or what I don't even know what's going to happen in 10 minutes' time. I don't even know the next words that are going to come out of my mouth. Mm-hmm. But there's something thrilling about that. And it's one of the reasons why I've increasingly been spending less and less time on the internet. I've been spending less time on social media, even though it's like partly my job. But I've been trying to find a way to get the information that I need to not be completely siloed off and like totally hermited. So I don't know what's going on in the world, whilst also not being trapped by a lot of the tenor of the internet, because the tenor of the internet, at least a lot of what I see at the moment, is very fatalistic. It's very cynical, and it's not a dream factory. But it's also not even
it's a nightmare factory. Which is a type of dream.
Yeah, I suppose so. But I was about to say, I don't know if it is a nightmare factory. Like, at least the nightmare factory would involve, it would be exciting. It's more vanilla and beige than that. It's like this sort of slow, trudging walk toward inevitable, boring despondency. I don't know. Like, it's just, I'm not a massive fan of a lot of the trends that I see on the internet at the moment, despite the fact that I curate a lot of things very carefully. And yeah, it makes me, when I think about it, when I truly, truly connect with this stuff, it makes me sad. It makes me sad to think how many people perceive the world in a way that is so like unintentional, so non-agentic. They're not a sovereign individual. They don't have control over their outcomes or their future. Things happen to them. Things happen for other people, but that's not going to be for them. And yeah, it's unfortunate. Now, that is a difficult situation for one person to get in. The point at which it really starts to rile me up is when those people begin to try and convince other people that that's the case. I'm like, yo, you can be as despondent as you want. Is that your choice? Ugh, free will debate's way longer than we've got time for. But you can be as despondent as you want. But there is nothing more perverse and toxic than trying to convince other people that they're living inside of the nightmare that you believe that you're already inside of. Like, that to me seems to be like, I don't know. I think the world would be a significantly better place if those people just weren't allowed to talk.
Well, it's their way of reducing their own cognitive dissonance, I assume, because the presence of other people who don't see that life is a nightmare, who are living their lives in an agetic way and moving in the direction with hopefulness and confidence towards their goals, is a palpable counter example, counter evidence, counterfactual to their entire worldview. It denies the validity of that worldview. And that's embarrassing because it, in some dim recess of their minds, calls up the possibility that things could be different and that they could be wrong. And that's actually very difficult to approach. Like this, there are actually some correlates here with depression. Like, I've worked with some folks who have been depressed for years and years and years. And at a certain point, after a certain amount of treatment, they do come to the understanding that maybe they've prolonged this condition longer than was necessary. Maybe they have been willfully mired in this state. And the possibility of recovery is isomorphic with admitting that they kind of did this to themselves and that they might have been wrong for years. And that's really difficult. That's the sunken cost fallacy, right? And so if I actually get better, it kind of admits that I could have done this earlier. And I'm having real trouble making sense of that. Does that make sense, Chris?
Absolutely. Yeah.